This is a live stream, right? Isn't
Yes,
it?
sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're on.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Board work session for July 22nd, 2020. The topic of this work session is Long Lake and Lawrence Lake proposed fee increase. And we have 30 minutes for this briefing. It looks like direction is needed. And so by way of introduction, first of all, if you want to join in via conference call, the phone number is 360-252-9020 and the pin is 1234. By way of introduction, I'm John Hutchings. I am the chair of the board. And we also have Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser, and Commissioner Gary Edwards is excused today. And I'm going to see if I can pick some people off because I've got smaller windows to look at with the PowerPoint. We've got County Manager Ramiro Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and we got from Public Works Karen Weiss and Tim Wilson, and they will introduce themselves and their titles when appropriate. And is there anybody I'm missing, Ramiro?
No, I think you covered. Marcy Taylor, I believe, is with us.
Marcy, okay.
I wanted to make sure that I did notice that Marcy Taylor is here.
Oh, good, thank you. And so with that, do you want to frame this, Ramiro, to begin?
Yeah, this is a yearly request, and I believe the decision before you is to consider an annual rate increases, which is part of their program for both lakes. Each one of those had a different percentage increase. Obviously, the decision needed for you today is not to approve the increases, but perhaps to include those increases as part of the 21-22 budget. And that perhaps the direction the staff is looking for. If I misstated, Tim, please correct me, but I believe that is the case.
And we would build the budget around that proposed or assumed revenue.
Yeah, and that is the intent, because the board cannot take an action on those increases outside of the budget process.
All right, we'll have to make sure that Commissioner Edwards gets this information.
So I will bring this decision for you next Tuesday morning. So,
all right, thank you,
just to make sure that you have the time to think about this.
Okay. So we're off and running, is it, Tim?
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Wilson, Water Resources Manager, Public Works. As Ramiro mentioned, we also have Karen Weiss and Marcy Taylor with us. And I am here today to talk to you about the proposed rate increases for both Long and Lawrence LMDs. As Ramiro mentioned, this is a fairly regular occurrence. We deal with this on a in conjunction with our regular budgetary process. The bottom line up front is a fee increase is recommended for 2021 and 2022 to support the work programs for both of these LMDs. So a little bit of history, just backing up, as you'll recall, Long Lake LMD was formed in 2015 by resolution, and Lake Lawrence was formed the year after in 2016. Both of these LMDs were established as 10-year lake management districts. They are on they've had several iterations of this prior to these formations, so they've been in existence for quite some time. So the funding structure of the LMDs, you're familiar with as well. There's annual charges that are levied for each category of property within the lake management district. Between the two lake management districts, there are somewhat different classifications of property, of which you have requested a briefing on, and we're preparing that briefing that we'll talk more about in the future. The current resolutions for both the lake management districts contain an escalation clause that allows us to increase their budget on an annual basis up to 5%. An ordinance is required to authorize the assessment the rate increases. So we would plan to come forward with an ordinance likely in August for that. So the important thing to consider in these proposed rate increases is that the steering committees for both of the LMDs are actively engaged in this process. Although the steering committees are just that, they are there to advise and steer the direction. We give them a lot of credence in terms of what they want to do within their work plan and how they want to manage their rates and their fees. We work with them to adjust work plans accordingly based upon the funding that they have available, so they are engaged actively. For Lake Lawrence, the process is that they hold an annual meeting, they have ballots, and they vote on these at their steering committee, and then we, as staff, vet that to make sure that that is in line with their work plan. It's a similar situation for Long Lake. They bring it up at one of their steering committee meetings and vote to approve or disapprove of a rate increase and discuss the amount. So following that process for the 2021 and 2022 cycle, the Long Lake LMD has proposed a 3% increase for each year for both 21 and 2022. And Lake Lawrence has proposed a 1% increase for each of those years. The increases based upon their work plan would, in general, support the work that they're doing out there. And staff is recommending that we adopt those rate increases. So a little bit about what this would mean in terms to a property owner out there. For Lake Lawrence, if we were to take the highest charged category, which is a lakefront property with a residence out there, they would see an additional charge of $2.83 in 2021, and again, $2.96 in 2022. That's with a 1% increase. So for Long Lake, it's a little higher. Their highest charge category is a lakefront property with residence, and at Long Lake, they're also charged by the amount of lakefront footage that they have. So this assumes 100 feet of shoreline, and their additional charge in 21 would be $13.14, and in 2022 would be $13.53. So the next steps would, I believe, would be for us to draft an ordinance similar to how we did it in the 2018 cycle. And we would draft that ordinance in August and bring that before the board, and also incorporate the rate increases into the 2021-2022 biennial budget. And with that, I would ask if there's any questions.
Now let me make my screen appropriately sized. Unless someone's going to remove. There we go. Commissioner Minister, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so how does this connect to what we had our public hearing on Tuesday? I'm getting confused with all of our lake things going on.
Yeah.
And does this require a public hearing as well?
No, this does not require a public hearing, as far as I'm aware of. I think the public hearing is, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a public hearing as part of the regular budgetary process that this would be included in, but it doesn't require its own public hearing.
Yeah, that will be.
And then the second part of the question is, how does it play with the public hearing from yesterday? Two different tracks for Long Lake specifically. So whereas the current resolution allows us to inflate up to 5% annually, and that is what they're recommending, on top of that, they have petitioned for an additional $34 per parcel increase. So how that would play is if the board moved forward with the $34 increase, then the rates that you see in this PowerPoint would be adjusted somewhat as well, because both of those would take place as of January 1st, 2021. Does that answer your question?
I guess, I mean, it's like it's just kind of confusing. Like why, when they're asking us for this extra chunk, why are they bothering with the 3%? I mean, why wouldn't they just kind of focus it into one ask instead of breaking it into two asks?
Yeah, so this was driven by the steering committee, and I would say that their rationale for the $34 rate increase and their messaging to their ratepayers was that $34 is equal to, for the average parcel, for the amount of the 50% stormwater fee reduction that each parcel that is included within a lake management district or a special use district receives from the stormwater utility. So their messaging out to their ratepayers was, hey, you're saving $34. We would like to recoup that $34. And their long-term goal here is to build up a reserve fund for a future alum treatment, very similar to what Black Lake Special District is doing. They're trying to save money for the future. But it's a good question, and it's definitely, it's valid. It's definitely a route that they could have gone, is to just forego the resolution allowed increase and go with a higher petition increase. I guess maybe their thought process on that was that if the $34 petition increase doesn't pass, then they're still moving forward.
Do you have more questions? I was gonna start doing some math, because I've got a few questions.
Go for it.
Okay. Number one, I'm looking at the page 5 of the PowerPoint. It says, I'm talking about just Long Lake at this point, 3% annual increase. So that's 369% over the next 3 years, starting 2020 or starting 21 and 22.
It would be 3% for fiscal year 21, and then 3% on top of that for fiscal year 2022.
And so with Long Lake, they'd be at in 2021 13.14 cents. But how did you get to the $34? What am I missing?
The $34 is a completely separate issue. That's a petitioned rate increase that they are doing separately from.
Oh.
That's what I was asking about. I mean, that 5%, like you were saying, well, why didn't they just ask for the higher rate? But what about the reverse? Like, could they have is there a mechanism to amend the ordinance and go above 5%? But that would only be they only want to do that remind me, are they going to do that $34 like for that's going to be ongoing, right?
The $34 would be a one-time increase in annual fees, is the petition. So their current fee, if you're a residential lakefront owner, and let's assume they have a $65 fee, then that would go to a $99 fee. And then the 3% increase would be on top of that.
But that's their business, that $34 fee, right? We're just looking to get the percent increase. Whatever they do, that's their business. We don't have to authorize it. It's not the county's issue, correct?
No, you need to authorize both.
Right.
But I think you need to perhaps keep in perspective, there's a time element in each one of those actions. You may consider the $34 increase, think in terms of raising the baseline. In the $34 proposed rate, I believe has a period of 10 years, correct? And because they like to, 2027, That's when they like to raise enough money to do the treatment in 2027. That's a separate action from the ordinance forming the LMD. Within the ordinance of the LMD, they have the option to increase based on inflation up to 5% on a yearly basis. So that's just two different actions the board needs to take, consider taking.
So that $34 annual fee then is good for 10 years?
I believe it's up to 2027. Is that correct, Tim? I think I misspoke on 10 years, but 2027 is when they need to do the treatment.
So the $34 rate increase, so they did not submit that with an end date. Black Lake Special Use District, to further confuse the issue, when they're asking you to consider a bond that would have a 20-year repayment period. Long Lake, what they're asking to do is a one-time increase in base rates that would then be the base rate.
Okay, so they're asking to increase the baseline of the rates by $34. Okay, and then in addition to that is the inflation rate allowed by the current ordinance.
So 4 and 5 years ago, when these lake management districts were formed, what was the base fee, the base rate then? If it wasn't 34, what was it? Do you know, Tim?
I can look that up and get it to you really quickly. They're different based upon the lakes, and they're different based upon the classification of property.
Okay.
$65 comes to mind, and I think that is the Lake Lawrence lakefront property base fee.
So it's up there.
Yeah, I can get that to you very
I
quickly.
don't need that. I'm just wondering if it was like $20 and now it's increased because of inflation and such. If it was $15, now it's up there 65-ish or so.
But I believe there is an escalation of the different fees because lakefront properties pay a higher rate.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact for Long Lake, I used to be part of the Long Lake. My fee was less because I was, I don't know, 5 blocks away from the lake itself, but my neighborhood had lake access.
Okay. My next question, and I'll get back to you in a minute, Ty. My next questions are kind of compound questions. Who sits on the steering committee? Not by name. Are they just residents, or is it anybody outside groups at all? And what has been, and how many on the steering committee? And what's the feedback do we hear from those that are outside the steering committee? And what would the other side say? It's too much, too soon, or it's not needed? Or how do you justify it? We weren't given a vote. We weren't given notice. There was no advertising. What's the other side going to say?
Right. So I'll speak lake by lake. So for Long Lake, for both lakes, there has been overwhelming support of these annual incremental rate increases. For Long Lake, they are talked about generally in their newsletters, which they put out twice a year. They are talked about in their steering committee meetings, which are typically well represented. For Long Lake, the steering committee is comprised of, I believe, 22 individuals. So each neighborhood that is within the Long Lake management area is allowed 2 representatives. So when it's a full steering committee, there's 22 individuals on that. It's the meetings are open to the ratepayers as well. So there is good dialogue going in there. For Lake Lawrence, the steering committee is structured a little bit different. It is basically anybody who shows up to a meeting is considered steering committee and has a voice. They also have, fairly robust and getting more robust in terms of participation in those meetings, good discussion. There was an improved outreach campaign driven from the steering committee this year that went out to the ratepayers to discuss this. There was a high degree of acceptance and understanding of the need. There was a little bit of debate at Lake Lawrence as to what percentage to apply. and the vote came in at 1%. So there was a little, there were a lot of votes as well for 3% or 5%, but they went with the vote out there, and that came in at 1%. Not a lot of opposition to these fee increases. Both Long Lake and Lake Lawrence have their eye on long-term projects to do alum treatments and treat the algae, which are very expensive treatments, and they're working very hard to establish a reserve.
Okay, and then how does this compare with Summit Lake? Because we went through that hullabaloo where all they had to do was fulfill the requirement of the RCW, and they did that, but it was very contentious. And how is this different from that?
Well, I would say that Summit Lake, as I recall, was trying to determine whether to establish a lake management district in the first place. And it's a little different. It's a drinking water supply out there. There's a lot of discussion and discourse, or there was at the time, over whether that algae was an issue, whether they wanted to, whether it should be the responsibility of the residents to pay for that. And there was a lot of opposition to formation of the district. In this case, you have a very engaged citizenry at both lakes, a long-standing history of organization out there, and a pretty clear goal from both of them in terms of what they want to do both in the short term and the long term. So I would say that's probably the difference.
I got it. Thank you, Tim. Ty?
I think I'm okay.
Wow. Karen, Marcy, Robin, anybody else want to weigh in or chat about this? No? Wow, it's coming back to you, Ramiro.
Yeah, I will bring this for the board's conversation on Tuesday morning during agenda setting. And at that point, I will ask the board to provide direction on this proposal.
Okay. As usual, Tim, fine job. Fine job.
Thank you.
And even those of you that don't speak, fine job. Thank you. All right, well, that concludes this briefing. And we'll take about a 5-minute break and then head to the next one.
That is correct. Thank you.
Utility consolidation, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.